it's 5 after, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am Alana Burke, and this presentation is called Taking a Project Public, the History of Lagoon. Get back to my slides. Okay. So, again, my name is Alana Burke. My pronouns are she and her. I wear quite a few hats working at Amazy.io. I'm the community manager, the developer advocate, and I do all the documentation. So just to explain things a little bit, Amazy.io is a hosting company, and we have an open source product called Lagoon, which is our deployment tool, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And just to give you a little bit of an overview, so we're a hosting company, and we have two sister companies, Amazy Labs and Amazy Metrics, and we have a parent company called the Amazy Group, and they factor into the history that I'm going to talk about here a little bit. So the history of Lagoon starts in 2007 in Switzerland with the Amazy Group. So the Amazy Group was founded with the idea to build a social platform. So they were going to build a freemium model, and they found an investor. They set about building this platform. And in 2008, they actually launched this platform as Amazy.com back on Drupal 5. But despite enthusiasm, this platform wasn't as successful as they'd hoped. Even though they did the whole startup thing, they went to Silicon Valley, went to conferences, promoted everything, dove in with tons of enthusiasm. But the beta launch wasn't what they'd hoped, and there wasn't really enough money coming in. But in 2009, a client requested a custom version of the platform, and that was pretty successful. And then another client requested it, and then another one did. And then they sort of became this agency providing customized solutions. So in 2010, Amazy.com closed quietly. And instead, in 2010, Amazy Labs launched. And Amazy Labs is a Drupal agency. So it started as a Drupal agency in response to this request for platform customizations of what had started as this social platform. And Amazy Labs has just been flourishing as a web agency ever since. And then in 2013, a large client had been asking for more SEO and analytics services that Amazy Labs wanted to provide, but it didn't really fit with the current service offerings and their current expertise. And so Amazy Metrics was born and has also been going strong ever since. So these are our two sort of sister companies. And so then we get to the birth of Amazy.io. So in 2015, there were about 35 people in Amazy Labs working around the world, and they discovered a problem. They couldn't find enough hosting providers who could host Drupal in every corner of the world where their clients were. Or worse, they were in places like Cape Town, where the internet very often goes out, which isn't great for hosting. So they made the decision to create their own hosting solution in Switzerland. They'd already hosted Amazy.com themselves, so there was already an existing team with experience working on hosting platforms. And due to regulations in Switzerland, many of their Swiss clients were looking for a Swiss hosting provider. So in late 2015, they put together a small business model and decided to give it a shot as a hosting company. And Amazy.io was born. And by 2016, Amazy.io was hosting Drupal sites around the world. And next up is how we get to Lagoon, our current deployment tool and open source product. So before Lagoon, Amazy.io had a legacy hosting solution that was based on Puppet. It was not open source. It was only able to run Drupal sites. And in 2016, the first customers started to build websites with Node.js and decoupled platforms like React. So faced with the challenges of the legacy platform, we started to experiment with OpenShift and Kubernetes and container-based hosting solutions. And as we iterated and the platform evolved, that eventually led us to start a new platform. And in 2017, that platform became Lagoon, which is now, which Lagoon itself has always been fully open source. So let's talk a little bit about Amazy.io and open source and the benefits of open source. So open source has always been very important to Amazy and Amazy.io. You know, with our background in Drupal, you know, Amazy Labs has always contributed back to the community with developer hours, as well as sponsoring and organizing events. There are some pretty major benefits of open source, we think, to even for having such a large and essential platform. You know, the other developers can contribute. You know, when someone finds a bug or wants a feature, they can submit a pull request instead of just waiting around for us to fix it. And this has certainly happened, and it's fantastic. We also get a lot of great ideas from our contributors, just suggesting things as they use our products over the course of the day. It's also more secure. More eyes on the code means better security and fewer bugs. Another major reason why we think that having our tool be open source is important is that it matches existing tools in the same space. You know, so many other things that people are using here are already open source, like Kubernetes, MySQL, PHP, Drupal, other CMSs, other pieces, excuse me, that you would use here. In fact, we use so many open source tools within Lagoon. And it also helps us to build community. So now that we have users running their own Lagoons sort of in the wild, we're slowly building a growing community of users. And I think that's really fantastic. It's really great to have people who are using our deployment tool and coming back to us and saying, oh, hey, we did this, and this is how it worked. And you know, we did this and we have questions about this, and we think that, you know, if you did this, it would be really helpful. And it's fantastic to have a community like that, even though ours is small and slowly growing. There are some challenges, of course, as there are with anything. Development can be a little slower, you know, because we don't have a closed system. We have to consider what could break for people who are using your platform all over the place. But that's a good thing. You know, we have to sit down and think instead of just moving quickly and breaking things. There's also more people involved in the decision making because, you know, we're not just working in, you know, we're not just working in a vacuum here. There's more people that can be affected than just our tiny little group here. But again, that's a good thing. So these challenges are actually good things. So now that brings us to the present and our decision to apply to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So let's talk about that. Before we talk about the decision to donate, let's talk a little bit about the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and what it does. So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, their mission is to make cloud computing ubiquitous. They help to guide projects, hold conferences, and grow the community. We chose them. There are several other foundations that could have been appropriate, but because Lagoon can deploy anywhere and many of our clients are looking to deploy to the cloud, and we develop with cloud native considerations in mind, and our current focus is deploying to Kubernetes, the foundation that fostered Kubernetes seemed like the right place to grow Lagoon. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation is also high profile, and it came up over the years with partners, customers, and advisors. So one of the reasons that we wanted to donate was to underline our dedication to open source, as well as provide our partners with the confidence that in a landscape where high-profile license changes are sometimes making the news, as you might have seen, having independent governance over the project not only makes good business sense, but allows Amazy.io the flexibility to define ourselves as a hosting provider while continuing to have this open source product, and know that it's going to be stable and it's going to stay open source, and letting our contributors know that they're not just contributing to our potential IP. They're contributing to an open source product that's going to stay that way. We also use a lot of other, as I just mentioned a little bit ago, we use a lot of other CNCF and other open source projects. We integrate with a handful of other cloud native services, all of which are open source. Some are sandbox, incubating, or graduated products. We use Kubernetes, Helm, Harbor, Open Policy Agent, FluentD, Prometheus, Operator Framework, Cert Manager. So it felt like, CNCF should be Lagoon's home. So it could sort of, go and live with all of its friends. So the purpose of donating Lagoon to the CNCF sandbox would be to help, provide alignment with some of the other projects that can benefit Lagoon's users and ecosystem. It'll streamline some of the contribution, the governance, and the concerns around open source projects, and also help our team to build a successful product. So that would mean that, our team would still initially be the major contributor to Lagoon, and we would still help to develop new features, maintain the existing ones, and plot the strategy for the product, as well as still dedicating our resources to maintaining and improving Lagoon, and still be making new feature contributions in partnership with our customers. But over time, we would hope to bring in more external organizational contribution to the project, so that we can get more companies to know and love Lagoon, and that way get more adoption. And hopefully, once the project is, fully part of the CNCF, we would have, not only better adoption and more contributors, but a more fully fledged community around Lagoon, which is something, as the community manager would make me really happy. And finally, one of the main points of contributing a project back to the CNCF is to have better governance and independent scrutiny. So, we would work with the CNCF. They would, we would have sort of a governance model that includes people from the CNCF, people from the Lagoon team at Amazy, and we would work together to continue to build up the product. And since this is DrupalCon, what's in it for the Drupal community? Why does this matter to Drupal? Well, Drupal so far has a very, when it comes to Drupal hosting, we think very traditionally of the sort of LAMP stack, and this could help make Drupal on Kubernetes more mainstream and help bring more cloud native benefits to Drupal. Drupal deserves amazing hosting just as much as anything else. Cloud native has always been tough for sort of small scale multi-container applications. And we think that we are able to bring sort of more cloud native benefits to projects out there that aren't able to fully utilize them. And of course, anything we can do to give back to the Drupal community that sort of fostered Amazy and everything that we are from the ground up, we want to do that. So we talked about a lot of benefits. So what are some potential downfalls? So of course, while Lagoon is technologically completely divorced from Amazy.io, it is, of course, what we use to power all of our hosting, and it's essential to our business. So there is the risk of a perceived lack of control over the project from Amazy.io customers. If we're very successful in donating this project and getting contributors, we could one day not be the largest contributor to Lagoon in the future, which would actually be amazing. Like, that would be a fantastic problem to have. But again, it could give this perceived lack of control over the project. So that's something that we would have to communicate to our customers and explain, the business reasons behind this and why this is actually a really, really good thing for the project. So we would have to explain why this is actually a good problem to have. And of course, we'd have to ensure that Lagoon continues to meet our customers' needs. So we would have to work with the governance model to make sure that while we evolve it as an open source project and that it sort of meets its own needs as it grows, we would want to make sure that that's also, we'd have to work out how to make sure that it's also meeting the needs of the Amazy.io customers, because, as much as we love our open source project, Amazy.io is also still a company and it needs to pay us. So that's a potential problem down the line, but we don't anticipate either of those being major issues. So the next thing I want to talk about, because I think there's a lot of people who have never done this before, is the CNCF process. It's actually a little tricky right now to figure out what the CNCF process is, because I think they have recently changed it. And so you wind up hunting around and you find sort of documents that link to documents that tell you what to do. So essentially, it's pretty simple. There's an optional presentation that you can give. Then you fill out a big Google form, and then you wait. So the first step to getting accepted is we did an optional first step that can give you a little bit of a boost. We had Michael Schmidt attend a meeting of the App Delivery Technical Advisory Group, and he gave a quick presentation on Lagoon, which went really well. And we felt really positive after he gave it, and that presentation was back in April. So after he did that, we made sure we had sort of all of our ducks in a row before officially submitting our project. We did some marketing stuff, social media, website. We had a bunch of GitHub organizational stuff to do in making sure that we divorced Lagoon from Amazy.io, moving things across GitHub organizations. That's something that's really important to the CNCF, is making sure everything has to be completely open source. It can't be the product of a company. It has to be like a standalone product. They're very strict about that. So that was something that we had to really work on, and it's something we've been working on with our marketing and things like that, and internally for a while now, mostly in anticipation of this. So we did a lot of that work. We did a lot of branding work for that. So we got everything starting to come together. The next thing is a very long Google form with a lot of questions about mostly how you feel your project fits in with the CNCF landscape. We agonized over it for a while before finally submitting it. And then you wait. The Technical Oversight Committee meets about every 2 months and reviews as many applications as they can get to at each meeting. So we wait and we wait and we wait, and you hope at each meeting that comes up that your your application is finally going to be reviewed. So we submitted this a while ago, and unfortunately, we did not get accepted this time around. We found out just about a week ago, but here's what happened. We were really disappointed and we were upset. I'm thinking, oh no, what happens? We have to refactor, our entire code base. What are we going to do? And then just about a couple days ago, we actually got to watch the video of the meeting. It was pretty disappointing, actually. We were the very last project to get discussed in the last 2 minutes of the meeting. And it turned out that they were overly concerned about the intersection of Lagoon and Amazy.io. And they seemed to be mistakenly of the opinion that Lagoon relied on proprietary Amazy.io infrastructure. So that was really frustrating to hear, but it was also a relief that we don't actually need to refactor our code base or make any major changes. It was just a misunderstanding. So we actually sent them an email to just clear that up and see if that changed anything. Generally, they tell us that you can reapply in 6 months. So we're waiting to hear back if clearing that up makes any difference. But otherwise, until then, we continue to run Lagoon as an open source project, as we always have. The steps that we've made in readiness for the sandbox application have made the project stronger anyway. And there could also be opportunities to assess other foundations, like the Continuous Delivery Foundation or the Apache Foundation, if the CNCF sandbox turns out not to work out. We knew this was going to be the beginning of a very long process. I was a little disappointed that I didn't have a happier ending to this presentation, but it's about the process and the journey and not the end of it. It's really been an interesting journey. It's something that I had never been a part of before, and it's something that I haven't seen. And I'm excited to see what happens. And I think it'll be exciting if we do get to be a part of a foundation and see how our project goes. I think it'll also be really weird if we do wind up handing off sort of our project, our baby, and let other people take control of it. But that's sort of the whole point. So that is what I had. If I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions if anyone has any.